We're all dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, I don't know how it is in the US, but here in the UK, it's like, oh, when you go to a restaurant, can you maybe offer us that table because we've got a few extra people joining? Oh no, sorry, we can't do that. Can you maybe add, instead of scrambled eggs, can you change that to poached eggs in my order? Oh no, sorry, we can't do that. We feel like we're always being boxed in and processed. You're just another number. They can't do anything special for you. And I think concierge medicine is really different to that. And we have to really learn from it to, as you said, make sure our patients don't feel processed and to also delight them with excellence in customer service. I mean, again, if they are having this amazing experience and treated so well in hotels, restaurants, shopping, why shouldn't they have a really good experience with their healthcare? Because if you give them a bad experience in healthcare, they just don't want to engage with it. And
Nothing in this podcast is intended to render legal, financial, medical, or other professional information. Because the details of your situation are fact-dependent, we highly encourage you to find a recommended individual that you can trust to give you the expertise that you need related to your situation.
Well, good morning or good evening, Docpreneur Nation. You're listening to Concierge Medicine Today's Docpreneur Leadership Podcast. And today we have the CEO of HealthClic from across the pond, Priyanka Chaturvedi. Now, I probably butchered your last name, so Priyanka is what we know each other as. Thank you for being our guest today and making the time from all the way out in England.
No, not at all. Thank you so much for having me. And it's such a pleasure to be part of this podcast. I've, been following CMT for such a long time, so really happy to be joining.
Well, today we have a fun topic. We're going to talk about how do we as leaders in healthcare communicate and motivate our team, which includes physicians, to be fans of our customers and patients. And we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about customer service. We're going to talk about patient care. But before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about you and HealthClic and what does an average day for you look like across the pond?
Yeah, so HealthClick is a concierge medical practice here in London. We were founded in 2015, so it's been quite a few years now. And I started the business. Actually, it was interesting. When I was at the Cambridge Judge Business School, there was a mentor of mine who was American, and I'd never heard of concierge medicine before. But, one of our, I guess, goals whilst we were studying there was to really gain an understanding of what we're passionate about and what change we want to bring in the world. And having grown up with two parents who are doctors, I think we finally got down to the fact that I felt very passionately about the healthcare system and, how the healthcare industry is very challenging for patients, especially if you don't have a doctor in the family. I think that was something growing up that I probably took advantage of, to be honest. I thought, oh, it's if I need something, if I need advice, if I need help, if I need some medicine, there's no problem. Whereas when you don't have a doctor in the family, it can be really, really challenging. So as I spoke about this more and more, one of my mentors at Cambridge was saying, have you ever heard of concierge medicine in the US? And I'd never heard of it, but as soon as I looked into it, I couldn't believe that no one was really doing anything like that here in the UK, because it's from where I was standing anyway, it looked like a model of healthcare where if you didn't have a doctor in the family, this was the way that you could almost get that feeling and have a real health advocate who could advocate for you, who could take care of you, who could also, guide you a little bit as well. So that's kind of, what HealthClick started from. I think I'd also like to add that a big part of that was also because growing up having doctors in the family, I realized that when we had a serious health crisis, if we didn't have the doctor in the family, we didn't have someone advocating, fighting, arguing with some specialists when necessary, that particular situation would not have turned out fine, actually. That person might not even be here today. So I think that's where the real drive to start a concierge practice came from. And in terms of a typical day nowadays, all these years on, I guess it's very, very different. A lot of my focus day to day is on the branding side of things, marketing, the client experience, making sure that also I check in with our doctors quite regularly. Sometimes we have quite big cases going on for some of our VIPs, or even not VIP, it might just be generally quite a big case coming up. So having oversight of those things and working closely with the doctors, as well as our medical director, who is my dad. And we're very, very lucky that he agreed to be the medical director as well, because he's been a doctor for over 35 years now, and he's a GP trainer here in the UK as well. So I also rely on him a lot when we are, trying to find new doctors or when we're trying to make decisions for our patients. So we work really closely together.
Wow. Are the physicians happy? That's what I'm wanting to know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. We have a really, really close relationship with our doctors, and I think the biggest challenge for a lot of the doctors, I'm sure it's very similar in the US, is that when they're practicing medicine, sometimes even in the private sector, but mainly in the NHS, which is our public sector here in the UK, they don't feel like they can practice the medicine that they feel is best for the patient. They feel that sometimes they're really restricted by certain protocols, guidelines, hoops that they need to jump through. And I think that can really, you know, wear down on the doctors. And on top of that, a lot of their time is spent on paperwork, dealing with bureaucracy, trying to really make things happen in a system that's designed to not really allow you to do things. So the reason why I think our doctors are quite happy and also have been with us for a long time, for many, many years, is because we try our best to allow them, or I'd say empower them, to focus on what they do best, which is taking care of the patients, being creative in finding solutions for them, and also exploring a bit of the global aspect of the care they can give to their patients as well. And our team, we just try as much as possible to empower our doctors to do that and to make sure that they don't have to worry about, admin or letters, or did that referral get sent, or billing, or, oh, my patient's got a really, really big hospital visit next week. Have we got a chaperone or someone to visit with them? So they don't have to worry about all the outside elements, which are very, very important to a patient's experience. Don't get me wrong, but we want our doctors to really, really focus on being excellent, world-class doctors. And that's the key thing, which I think is very different to working at HealthClick compared to, working at an average GP practice in the UK.
So what's the story of HealthClick? What would your last patient say? Because there's always, I look at things in healthcare from the lens of the patient. I am not a physician, but I do know what it's like to sit on the other side of the exam room or the service window, or the telephone or the website from you and your practice. And healthcare is littered wherever we go, whether it's abroad or locally here in the United States. It's filled with complexity. And it sounds as though it's as complex there as it is here. The same sentiment that you're sharing that the physicians feel there, they're feeling here too. It's like a mirror. And so I look at things through the lens of, in healthcare, there are tensions that need to be managed constantly. Like, it's just is that just is. And then there's problems that can be solved. Like, we can do everything we possibly can, morally, legally, and ethically, to resolve this problem or to manage this tension. And so, from the tensions to manage versus problems to solve, what is HealthClick doing to manage a tension and solve a problem in your local market?
Absolutely. And that's completely correct. There's always so many, I guess, so many hats to juggle as well. I think when you're advocating for patients in a concierge practice, I mean, look, the patients that we take care of, you might have seen on our website, we refer to them as leaders. We really take care of, I would say, a clientele that's comprised of global citizens and business leaders, leaders in entertainment, high profile figures. And that's, I would say it's not like we started out wanting to take care of these patients. I think that's just how the market in the UK naturally um, placed us, if that makes sense. And it's really interesting because when I first started doing this, I was thinking, oh, you know, all these ultra high net worth individuals, they probably have their healthcare completely sorted. You know, they don't have to stress about anything. But I realize now how naive I was thinking that because actually, if anything, I found that they have almost 100 more problems sometimes to deal with or to think about. Um, and I'm going to give an example here, which, I hope doesn't make the UK system look too bad. But, um, one example that perhaps I don't have to worry about when I go and see a doctor is that, you know, and this is an actual email that I had a look at yesterday, literally yesterday. I don't have to worry about my surgeon sending an email to my GP and saying, look, because of who Priyanka is, I think, there's a lot of risk involved in doing the surgery for her. And due to that, I'm not going to accept insurance to pay for the surgery. I'm only going to accept out of pocket or self-pay, a self-pay rate for the surgery. Um, which is obviously really, I mean, from my perspective, that's really not good. I don't think it should matter who the patient is, whether they are, you know, I don't know, Donald Trump or myself, no matter how famous or well known they are, I don't think it's right to selectively decide who you will offer insurance care to and who you won't, especially when it comes to something like a surgery. I mean, all of our clients, all of our members, they have insurance for this very reason. So they don't have to fork out tens of thousands of pounds or sometimes even more than that for a surgery. So that's an extra layer that when I started this business, I never thought we'd have to manage. I never thought in a million years that we would get doctors saying, or hospitals, surgeons saying, look, happy to take care of your patient, but there's a lot of extra stress involved to do a surgery for him or her. I'm not going to accept insurance. I'm going to have to accept self-pay. And the problem is that also erodes the trust between these patients and healthcare providers. And I've noticed this over the years, they have a massive trust barrier up, not just with doctors, but overall, because they're worried that people are only, talking to them or interested in them because of who they perceive they are based on their role on the TV screen or in the boardroom. And, you know, that's really, really tricky. And I think as a doctor, that can be very tricky if you're not fully aware of the context. So that's definitely, I would say, one of the layers of tension that we deal with quite regularly. And it's not something nice. It's not something that I ever anticipated, but I would really hope that, our patients would say that HealthClick are always very open, very honest. They don't recommend anything that, is just to financially benefit somebody. And they certainly would be honest and open with me if a surgeon or a doctor did, you know, mention or make such a comment that would potentially be me spending money unnecessarily when I don't need to. So I would hope that, and I'm very confident that our patients would say that actually, um, because, we're not incentivized by them getting sick or, you know, by them needing to have treatment or a surgery. We have the membership, the retainer. So if anything, we're incentivized by keeping them in good health. So I would hope that that sort of honesty and trust that we've managed to build over the years would be reflected in what our patients would say.
Well, let's briefly zoom out for a minute and just briefly describe, if you can, kind of what healthcare is like for a general patient or for and then how it's different for your clientele or how it's the same and why HealthClick was created as a concierge practice within the UK system to say, here's what we do for our patients. And because I think that we all have a tendency when we think about healthcare, we think about physicians, we think about, well, if you're not doing what everybody else does, then you're not being fair.
Mm.
And, you and I have, because we come from, more British backgrounds. I'm Canadian and probably one of the last Canadian, you know, people on the planet to think that concierge medicine is a pretty cool thing. You're obviously doing what you do and think it's pretty neat, and your dad does too, and the doctors that work for you. And I think that we've all seen doctors and medical offices try to be fair, and eventually fairness becomes an excuse for non-engagement. And that, how did that work out for everybody? That's not working out very well, but we're trying, so therefore, well, let's criticize the folks who try to do concierge care. Let's criticize the physicians who are and say, well, they're only doing it for the money. But that was, years and years and years ago, and things evolve. I mean, and we'll talk a little bit about this from your MBA and economics perspective of getting into that in just a minute. About how things start out as expensive, but then competition, innovation, simplicity, we're able to make things. Remember how much a genetic test was,
Yeah.
10, 15, 25, 30 years ago? It was super duper expensive. But it's now you can get it in a saliva test, and the little saliva test can tell you if you're a good public speaker or not. So, I think that this quest for consistency in healthcare has become an excuse, and, it's not helping. So tell us a little bit about, what your vision is for HealthClick and what healthcare is like for your patients and the general population out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, I completely agree with you. And I think HealthClick has the same vision in terms of, you know, there are early adopters in every industry. You wouldn't have a car so accessible to the middle class, to the working class, if someone didn't buy the first car at a very, very high price. So that's the,
Yeah.
the first place to start. There are always early adopters in an industry, and they help that industry. Like you said, with the genome test, I think Steve Jobs paid over $100,000 for his genome test back in the day. So and now it's only, I think for a whole genome sequencing test, the price is coming more to like $3,000 or something. But it's really, really important to keep that in mind. I think it's very easy, like you said, to blame or to feel like it's not fair, but actually that's what happens at the early stages of markets and of industries. And it's just the cycle of it. You can't really, you can't innovate without having that early adopter theory, which that's absolutely, I would say, where concierge medicine is in the UK. I think it's definitely earlier stages than the US. In the US, obviously, it's been going on since 1996. And I'd also add that for us, in terms of HealthClick's vision, the average person in the UK is very, very lucky to have NHS care, which is fantastic. But we have to also appreciate that with something like NHS care, there's resource constraints, there's, long wait lists. There's also a big challenge of cost, which, it affects the doctor's decision making as much as people don't like to admit it. That is the reality of it. And this is why the private sector in the UK, especially in London, has been growing very, very quickly, because London has become a little bit of a hub for a lot of global citizens. So, we have so many people from Middle East, US, Asian countries. They come here, they spend many months out of the year here, they send their kids to school here. So they might not be living in the UK 365 days out of the year, but when they're here, they're really seeking the type of healthcare they're used to in their own countries. And I think you have to keep in mind that their expectation of what is normal is completely different to what we are used to here in the UK. So that's one point. But I think also the second point is that if we're going to move with the industry, we're going to operate and help patients in more of a preventative angle. We can't do that with 10-minute appointments on the NHS that are very resource constrained. It's not possible. And I always say to our team as well, there's such an opportunity cost for not helping and doing what we do, not helping these patients and these leaders, because ultimately if something were to happen to a huge, let's say a very successful business leader, or someone who runs one of the biggest shows in the world, then there is a big, big knock-on effect if something were to happen. I mean, a lot of people say after Steve Jobs, Apple was never the same. And you have to really, really keep that in mind when you're helping these people, because it's easy to sort of look at HealthClick and say, oh, but you just help people who are already extremely successful and have everything going for them. But number one, they have their own challenges and their own difficulties in healthcare. I'd say, and I always say this, especially when it comes to the mental health space, I'd say if you're in the bottom um, uh, part of the socioeconomic level and the top, you're probably facing the most stress and the most mental health issues. Whereas in the middle, we all deal with it, but I would say it's really interesting how that gets concentrated at the bottom and at the top as well. And we see one perspective of these people, but we don't see what's going on behind closed doors. And then we have to look deeper and also see that, look, if this company were to collapse, or if the share prices were to be affected, or if this show got cancelled, what is the knock-on effect? Many people's livelihoods will be affected, many people's jobs will be at risk. So we can't just look at it at surface value. I think you have to understand that I think when you come into any type of business, you have to learn that there is a non-monetary value attached to everything that you do. And for something like concierge medicine, the non-monetary value might be a lot higher because you're essentially paying for more of an exclusivity almost on a doctor's list. You're not one of 10,000 patients, you're maybe one of a few hundred at maximum. So that is just how economics goes. And I think we also need to appreciate that in the years to come, concierge medicine will also become more accessible to the general population. But that will only happen if we continue serving the customers who demand it or really, really need it right now.
I think I've figured out usually when I think about what the titles of different interviews are going to be, they usually come to me when we're in the middle of the conversation, which this one did. And I think that our guest today, Priyanka, she's the CEO and founder of HealthClic out in the UK. An Autopsy on Success, I think, is a great title for this. Maybe or maybe not. I don't know. I'll kick it around. But I think that studying and learning from your success and your success with your patients and the physicians that you've been working with, there's something that we can all learn, because it sounds as though it's exactly like what physicians, the trials and tribulations that physicians face here. And a lot of the patients are feeling the exact same way. And it's interesting that you made the correlation and the parallel between a low socioeconomic factor and the and a high net worth individual, that their stress is compounded. It's accentuated so much more. And you wouldn't have to think very long back to COVID, and we saw the movie studios and the movie actors getting very upset because look, they recognize that, like, hey, if I get sick, the whole production, the whole business stops. And I care about, despite what the media reports are, I do care about the people, who are putting the clothes on my back, or cooking the food in the corner. And so there is something to be said about the mental stress of that. But often the ultra high net worth individuals and those families and people who can afford those options, get a bad rap for saying, well, they're just crybabies. Well, they're not. They have real stresses as well. And I think that we need to understand what they're going through and understand why physicians are doing this. Because as we've said around here a lot, it's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It's about being the best doctor for the world and for your patients and for your local community. And we don't give physicians enough credit, peer to peer, colleague to colleague. I see from my seat on the bus looking at healthcare that I know that if that doctor is making that decision on behalf of his practice, behalf of his patients, he's doing it with the family in mind, he's doing it with his patients in mind, and he's or she is worth it. And it's such a struggle to communicate to physicians from, especially those who are curious, not the ones who are in concierge medicine, but a business leadership and kind of, principle, I think that you'll probably find very familiar is, businesses, for example, that make money are usually seen as evil in today's culture. And, but you and I know that businesses that, sure, there are businesses out there who do bad things, but I think that that's probably not that's a case by case basis. More companies are doing great things, just like more doctors are doing really great things. And that money that they're making usually pours back into the business or the community. I've heard doctors say, I just gave myself a $5 raise just because I needed the incentive to know that this is working, that I'm worth it. I don't think I'm worth it, but I hear other people around me and my patients say, you're worth every single penny. In fact, some of them are like, I've been waiting for you to do something like concierge medicine. So we tend not to do an autopsy on our success. We generally do autopsies on our failures. But if you don't know why it's working and when it's working, you can't fix it once it breaks. And that was a quote from one of my favorite authors, Andrew Stanley. And I want to ask you and your team, you to speak on behalf of your team and your physicians when you're working with the ultra high net worth clientele and patients. We'll dive into their mindset and what does that look like to have a practice full of those types of individuals, the challenges that brings to the physicians and to you as a business leader. But what do you and your team do right now every day that's just effortless?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I think it's a great question because you want to have that culture where your team feel like they can effortlessly add value to your customers every day. And you're absolutely right. I think we do so many autopsies on failures, but sitting down and thinking about the successes and what's working well is also equally as important. I mean, I know I brought up earlier that if we don't help these people, there's a big opportunity cost to it. And I think that's something that I really, really try to push into our team's minds as much as possible. So, even if it is you make, let's say one of our, members, they can't make a cardiologist appointment on a certain day at a certain time. Because our team, we also go ahead and book the secondary care or specialist appointments for our patients. Um, you know, I always say, do your absolute best to work with the hospital or the specialist to see if they can, even if it is one afternoon, if they can extend their clinic, even just by 30 minutes to see the patient, or maybe one day they're having a clinic literally 2 doors down. Because, in the UK, a lot of specialists work still with NHS and private. So sometimes they can easily, if the private hospital allows it and has the room, allow the specialist to come in and even see a patient or two over lunch. So I always say, even if you can do something small like that for our patients, it can go such a long way. And the reasoning behind that is a bit deeper, because if you think about it, if one of these members, let's say, can't see the cardiologist, he's busy filming, or too many meetings, and he says, look, I'm traveling to LA this Friday anyway, let's do it when I'm back in a month or two's time. You'll say, okay, fine, that's the patient's choice, he can't make it into the cardiologist's clinic, but the consequences of that could be a little bit more than we might think about on the surface. The more that, I mean, look, if the cardiologist said to me that, look, I strictly have only this clinic, you can come, next week, you can come the week after, I'll make something work. But with these people and how their schedule is sometimes, they genuinely can't. And that's why they say, look, we'll put it off. And a big pattern I realized early on in the business that they'll put it off. That they think, oh, well, there's no way around it, so we have to put it off. And what we found was, because of all this putting off for probably quite a few years, when they finally came to us, there was already a lot of issues going on, which we were surprised hadn't been addressed or taken care of. And it was because their care was so disjointed. They'd see one doctor about something, and then maybe they couldn't get in for a follow-up. So they'd say, oh, I'll deal with it, in a few months' time. And then a new set of symptoms comes up, and then they see a new doctor. So the care becomes so disjointed. And that's why even our admin team knows, and that I will always tell them, do whatever you can to get them in for their appointment. It might seem silly, it might seem like, oh, why are we doing this extra work just for an appointment time? But it's really, really important to bear in mind that if someone keeps putting their health off for months and months and months, what the consequences of that can be. So I always say to the team, even if you get one success like that in a day, that's something that you can feel really, really happy about. Even if you know, pick up the phone to one of the members' assistants and say, look, I know this particular clinic for this doctor doesn't work. However, on the dates and times you've given, there is another specialist who can see him. Would you like me to book that in? Just give them the option, give them the flexibility, show that it's not just the concierge doctor at HealthClick who's advocating for them, but also our team who's advocating for them. That's super, super important. And one last thing I'd say as well, which our admin team will definitely agree with. If, you know, it goes the other way as well. If the patient has to, on slightly shorter notice than is ideal, cancel an appointment, be as empathetic and compassionate as you can, because you know, it's very, very rare that you get people who are genuinely so careless and they don't care and they just cancel last minute all the time. But more often than not, what's happened is that something's come up, filming schedules changed, meetings changed, flight has changed, and they genuinely, genuinely need to move an appointment. And they're probably not feeling good about it. So don't show an attitude, don't be annoyed, don't be angry. It's always, always best to just come from a position of empathy and compassion. And I think I'm sure all of our patients would agree that we've never, ever had anything to say when they've cancelled an appointment. But, oh, absolutely, we completely understand. Leave it with us. We'll get this appointment cancelled and we'll reach out. We will schedule to reach out back to you in a few days' time to offer some alternative options. So I think that's also a key part of making a practice with these types of patients work. You have to really get into their day-to-day lifestyle, the psyche. You have to understand why certain things are happening, why, and we're not arguing that it's not more time consuming to take care of these patients. Sometimes it is, but there's a reason for that. And and that's also the added value that you're providing, and then that's why they're happy to pay the premium. And that's why you have concierge practices that will charge $25,000 a year versus $3,000 a year. So I think it's really, really important to know what's working well, and also to have that open communication with your patients as well, to ask them if there's anything more you can do to make their lives easier.
From a marketing and patient education and even a collegial education perspective, I can't imagine the conversations around the water cooler, or, so to speak, about you're a concierge doctor in your neck of the woods, because it's one of those things that people are so unfamiliar with it, where, here in the States, we've debated that over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And now it's, kind of relatively new to a lot of the physician population, patient population. And we've seen here in the US, I was just interviewing a couple of different concierge doctors in different places and spaces. One was in a hospital, one was in a private clinic. And I was like, do you think that the mindset, the bias, this cognitive bias is diminishing? They're like, absolutely. It used to be that physicians would cross their arms and stand at the back of the room and criticize. Now, you know, and because of what they were trained to do, like they were trained to be everything for everybody and make no money and wear it like it's a badge of honor and wear this burden for the population and wake up and then rinse off and do it all over again first thing tomorrow morning. But that's unsustainable, as we've all come to see. But I can only imagine how challenging some of those conversations are. So, from your vantage point, from a public relations perspective, a reputation management perspective, what are those conversations that your physicians are having when they meet and encounter, or you meet and encounter, and people bump into concierge medicine? Is it one of like, seriously? Like, why did you need to choose that audience as your patient demographic? Or is it one of like, that's really interesting. I'd really like to know more because, man, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a combination. Absolutely. I mean, of course, in the UK, because we have such a big government and public healthcare system, it's definitely, I think if you're not dealing with, let's say, the global citizens, it's definitely a surprise to a lot of people. And I think but I think you have to just accept that as well. Not everyone is going to like what you do. Some people will be excited by it and some people won't, and that's okay. I think what you said there about doctors wanting to be everything for everybody, it's not really possible. I mean, it's kind of like how some doctors specialize. In business, you have to specialize. You have to have a target audience and a target consumer, and you have to, really hone your brand, especially when you're a new business. If you try to be everything to everyone, then no one really knows, like, should I be following you, or should my older parents be following you, or should my younger brother be following you? So, you need to be very clear with who your customer segment is. Otherwise, you're not going to get that following and that brand identity. And I think with these types of conversations, when you are met with the negativity around concierge medicine, I think you know, I found that it's sometimes better to just sometimes engage in the conversation. You can have a lighthearted debate with somebody. I think also sometimes you can also sometimes keep some thoughts to yourself, because if they have that opinion, we don't have to necessarily change their opinion. I mean, we know that some of our VIP patients have sponsored children from very disadvantaged backgrounds to have life-saving healthcare in the US. As we brought a few children over to the US because of that. And we know the impact that we're having, and I think that's okay. I don't think we need to worry about other people's opinions. But of course, there might be people who would like you to almost change their mind. There are some people, I think, who maybe would love to go into something like concierge medicine, but maybe are afraid to do that. So being able to just have that light-hearted conversation with them, or light-hearted debate, and show them your side can also be, secretly helping them. Because I think a lot of people, as you said, they want to do what everybody else is doing on the surface of it, even if inside maybe they're thinking something different. So it's definitely important to stay true to yourself as well in those moments, and in a very light-hearted way also share your perspective, because it might help somebody else as well.
So we're coming in for a landing with our guest. She's the CEO and founder of HealthClic, Priyanka. I'll say it, Chaturvedi, but I know I'm pronouncing it. So why don't you go ahead and say your last name, because it is you and your dad have a great last name. I'm butchering it.
No, it's Chaturvedi, and I know it's pronounced a little bit differently with an American accent, so we don't mind at all.
So I want to talk. I have some last minute questions as we come in for a close in our last 7 minutes, but I want to make sure we cover a couple of the big ones. I want you to talk about opportunity cost, and maybe that thread in why the focus on this patient base. And we kind of talked about the disjointedness in the healthcare system, but you had a business idea. You took it from big idea to reality, and you were able to get people to join you in that mission and vision. So talk a little bit about opportunity costs from the economics perspective of your background in economics.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess this is the thing. I think even a lot of people who study economics initially, they've never really heard of opportunity cost. They don't really think in that way. But I mean, in very basic terms, it's essentially um, the price of not doing the alternative. So, if, let's say, you're deciding between doing a gap year, having a year out to travel, versus going to to work straight away and earning money, you might say that the opportunity cost of traveling is the money that you will lose, or maybe the work experience that you will lose out on. Whereas vice versa, if you go straight into the job, the opportunity cost might be of an amazing, unique 1 year travel experience. So I think when it came to this customer base, it didn't start off like we targeted them at all. I think when we started, we were thinking maybe we would be attractive to the upper middle class in the UK. But we quickly realized that with how the private healthcare market is in London, it's quite different to the US in the sense that even the middle class here won't be getting an annual checkup with their doctor. You know, many of them might say, I haven't seen my doctor in 10 years, which from the people I've met in the US over the years, I would say that's quite different. I think at the very least, people are at least having an annual physical with their doctor. So we had to pivot quite quickly, and you know, I didn't realize exactly who our customer segment would be until maybe a few months along the line. And it was only when, this takes me back quite a few years now, but it was only when we received a phone call one evening from one of our partners. So we do one-off appointments for our partners. So if we're partnered with a concierge service or you know, a lifestyle management service, we'll do one-off appointments for them as well, because we gain a lot of new patients that way. We had a late night phone call about a VIP. They can't tell us the name, who really, really, really needs to see a doctor, but it has to be after 10 p.m. at night due to filming. And we were thinking, oh, that's, you know, that's really crazy. Who is this? And, you know, in my head, because I wasn't used to this clientele, I was thinking, I'm so surprised they don't have anything set up. Why are they calling us? So, you know, it was one of those moments where we could have easily said, oh, you know, after 10 p.m., oh, we can't make it today, you know, we can do it tomorrow or something like that. But, you know, we thought, no, let's actually do this. Let's help them, because this is a real surprise as to why they would need to call a company that they've never used before. And it was, if I'm honest, it was only really a few days after that I truly understood, because what ended up happening was that the doctor who went to see this patient after he'd finished filming for the day, you know, even though he was only called for a particular medical issue, it turned out there were quite a few things going on in the background. And the more that we delved into it, the more we understood that, oh, this hasn't been dealt with. This was addressed by a doctor a few months ago, but there's been no time to move on from there. And the reason why they were calling a random company, as far as I was concerned, was because they couldn't just register with one practice and stick to it, because every time they needed an appointment, one practice could offer it, but the other couldn't, or one doctor was in town and the other wasn't. And that's when I realized that the opportunity cost of not helping these patients or being flexible and adaptable to them could be, as you said, you know, that's it. The whole show or the whole filming for the month is cancelled. It could be, and you know, even if you go a step further, that means that maybe the set or the venue or whoever else is getting paid at the end, it has an impact on them as well. It's not just the person who's filming, it's not just their staff, it's not just the people involved. It's, you think about the studio, you think about the owners of the studios, you think about the small, especially in and around the UK, we've got a lot of small or medium-sized businesses that are running studios and things like that. So there's a huge impact. And also the opportunity cost that you have to think about is the fact that they're not going to get these health issues dealt with at all. And then that obviously can take you down a road of, if we, you know, if you just leave them like that and they keep going from doctor to doctor and hearing, oh, I can't see you with this, I can't help you with this, you need to see this person, or if you want to see me, you've got to wait 3 weeks. That means they're just bouncing around, you know, different doctors, different opinions, and their healthcare is completely disjointed, and that could also lead to some health crises in the future. So it was at that point, I think, where I had that real realization that there is a real opportunity cost of not serving this market, and clearly there's a need for it. And I just said, let's just jump in, because we only really one or two examples like this for me to realize that this is a huge problem. Because you think, right, why would a VIP, high profile, recognized person need to call a brand new practice that they've never heard of to help them in the same evening? It didn't make any sense to me. Now over the years it makes a lot of sense, but I think that story sort of highlights where, you know, we really realized that this is not And this is also not the average style of looking after patients either. It's not just, the standard formula that we can just keep repeating. It's every single patient has a completely different preference, a completely different way of working, a different lifestyle. And it also means that we can't just not even train our staff on that. So one of the biggest changes we had to make was train not only our team members, but also our doctors that this is a whole different ball game. We had to speak to them like that and say, look, this is a whole different ball game. This is how we need to operate. We need to be different. We're going to have a lot of pushback. A lot of the hospitals, a lot of the specialists are not going to like it. They're not going to like it when you as a doctor come and visit with the patient in the hospital. They're not going to like that you might be present in some of their specialist appointments, but this is how it needs to be. And over the years, at the HealthClic doctor, the healthcare primary physician will sit in specialist appointments. Often the patient will say, look, I can't make it to my follow-up call, my follow-up virtual appointment with the surgeon this afternoon, but can you go and do the appointment for me and let me know your opinion? Out of the 3 options he's given me, what's best for me? So that's, people didn't like that at first. It was very new, very odd. But then we also came across many specialists and many hospitals that embraced it. They were like, oh, it's so good having you here because you can tell me and answer the questions that maybe the patient can't answer about his own history because it's been
Yeah.
so disjointed that they can't even answer questions about their own medical history, if you can believe it. So um, there was a lot of learning involved there, but there's a lot of value that we didn't even see would be added by working in this way. And it was all thanks to that one really late night phone call we had that we just decided to take a chance on.
I just embrace that mission and vision and that spirit of, how can we make what we do better for our patients or better for the world, the little world around us. And I love the global citizen market because I think that they teach us and inform us that, no matter where you are, engagement is the new currency. Being engaged as my physician, as a patient, we can log on to our smartphones and within 5 minutes for a nominal fee, we can be talking with a practitioner, regardless of how people feel about that. Yeah, there's going to be some resistance, but good leaders, and I would say even better doctors, like, the team that you have and the organization that you've created, they're always looking to improve. And true leaders like you and like your team always keep asking the question, how can we improve the process? Because healthcare, sure, it's a process, but the patient should never feel processed. And whether you're at the low end of the socioeconomic scale, or you're at the high end, or you're in the middle, we're all feeling the disjointedness that you're talking about. I have 2 final questions for our guest today, Priyanka Chaturvedi. She's the CEO and founder of HealthClick. We'll put the links in the show notes below as well. And I've been wanting this conversation with you for years, and so I'm glad that we're finally able to connect our schedules and get some really dive in and ask you some great questions about success, and that you've been very gracious with your time. The last book that you've read, or that you encourage your team to read, or maybe that's like you give away this book the most, and you're like, I don't know why, but our doctors just love this book.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of books that are coming to mind. So I mean, one book which I would say for anyone who's in business or dealing with clients or in a sort of very face-to-face job, whether it's with a patient, whether a client or a customer. I mean, we all call them different things, but ultimately we are there to serve them. One book I would say is New Sales Simplified. I would 100% recommend that. New Sales Simplified is excellent in helping you very clearly and concisely convey and build your brand and how to what's fantastic is that it's the kind of book where you could just like delve into it one evening. You don't even have to start at the beginning. You can go into a chapter, and it's very practical. So it will literally have examples of how a particular company how they call it, how they could frame their mission statement. So it really, really helps you hone and refine your message to your consumers, which is amazing. And it's so, so valuable. I don't think I could have really um, branded this company without that book. So New Self Simplified, I think, is amazing. The other book, which I'm going to mention, which actually we spoke about, is I don't have it on this desk here, but I have it in the other room. But Excellence Wins.
Oh, yeah.
I've just been reading that, and what's really, really interesting is that the Ritz-Carlton perspective of things in that book is I already kind of used that in our business already, because I was looking at how can we, our clientele, they're used to going to five-star hotels, they're used to this amazing service. Why can't we replicate that in the health space for them?
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
Thank you. Somebody out there believes in that too.
Yes, absolutely. So, and we were already kind of taking inspiration from them, because we were saying, look, in a hotel, there's certain language they use, but and there's certain ways they make you feel when, especially when things go wrong, because that's the challenge, right? Everyone can be lovely and happy when things are going right. But when we really looked into it and I studied this, it turns out that they are given a whole handbook of how to deal with issues and how to turn the patient's experience, or sorry, the guest's experience around. And it involves saying things like, it's my pleasure rather than you're welcome, because you want the customer to feel like it's your pleasure and you're so happy to be able to help them. You're delighted to be able to help them. Not when you say you're welcome, it can imply a little bit of a give and take. It can imply maybe some obligation. And for example, in the training that I created for our team, I said, never ever use the word unfortunately. Just don't do it. If you have to use a word like that, say sadly. And don't say no, say yes, but always try to offer an alternative. Or if you do have to say no, don't frame it as a no. Be very, very careful with your language. As we mentioned earlier in this discussion, if someone needs to cancel, or a customer or a guest or patient comes to you with negative news, such as we need to cancel, or we can't make this, or we're not happy with this, don't meet that with a negative mindset. Meet it with being on their side and advocating for them, as you would for a family member. And that really ties into the whole mission, really, of making HealthClick feel like a practice where you have when you're with this practice, you feel like you have a doctor in the family. You really feel like you have a team behind you who's advocating for you. So that's why I would say that this book, Excellence Wins, I've only just started reading it, but I've made a lot of progress, and I'm 100% going to be recommending this to our whole team, because even though we've already taken some lessons from the same company, it's an incredible book. And I think, look, we're all dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, I don't know how it is in the US, but here in the UK, it's like, oh, when you go to a restaurant, can you maybe offer us that table because we've got a few extra people joining? Oh, no, sorry, we can't do that. Can you maybe add, instead of scrambled eggs, can you change that to poached eggs in my order? Oh, no, sorry, we can't do that. We feel like we're always being boxed in and processed. You're just another number. They can't do anything special for you. And I think concierge medicine is really different to that. And we have to really learn from it to, as you said, make sure our patients don't feel processed, and to also delight them with excellence in customer service. I mean, again, if they are having this amazing experience and treated so well in hotels, restaurants, shopping, why shouldn't they have a really good experience with their healthcare? Because if you give them a bad experience in healthcare, they just don't want to engage with it. And that's not good for their health. It's not good for the healthcare industry overall. And it's not good when we're trying to move away from the sick care model. Um, you know, as I know we've discussed at CMT before, we don't want to say, when you're sick, you come and pay us. But if they hate coming to see you and they hate talking to their doctor, they will only come to you when they're sick. So you want them to have a really positive experience so that they feel like, oh, this really interesting study has come up and my friends are trying out this new treatment and I'd love to ask my doctor what he thinks about that. You want them to view it as a positive rather than it's like what they say when you're exercising. Find an exercise that you really enjoy. Don't try to push yourself to do something you absolutely hate, because you're not going to make a habit out of it. I think it's quite similar. If we want to really make concierge medicine feel like, more like healthcare, more like wellness care, you don't want to make them hate coming to see you or have a bad experience with you. Otherwise, we're stuck with sick care. And they also might not renew their membership. They'll be like, you know what, I only pay every time I'm sick, which is 3 or 4 times a year. So I might as well, go and see any other private GP on Harley Street in London. So
Wow.
I think that's really, really key. I would say that book and that the learnings that come with it is super, super key to the field of concierge medicine.
Yeah, we hand that one out. It's on our book list of the top 50 books that we send out, or we release a book list twice a year for summer and winter for doctors, and that one is always on the list of what people are reading in the concierge medicine space. And I'm so grateful for your time. I have one more question for you, but also I want to, riff on what you just mentioned, because concierge medicine to me, I hope it doesn't become mainstream, and I don't think that it ever will, just simply by its definition and nature. And I think that concierge medicine today, at least how we see it here in the United States, is, and I think that you would echo this as well, as because you were on a roll there, what you just said is it sets the example for how healthcare could be and should be, because we should not make the idea of going to see our doctor any less pleasant than having dinner or a conversation around the kitchen island in our home. But yet we add so much complexity to it under the guise of, well, this is just how we've always done it. And right there is the rub. Right there is the tension and the problem, the tension to manage, and the problem that you and your team and other concierge doctors continuously solve. And that is, you know what? We're always looking to improve. And I know that you are too, in your own way, in your own system, in your own bureaucracy. And there's nothing wrong with that. You do you. You stay in your lane because you enjoy where the box that you put yourself in. Essentially, you enjoy the Sunday scaries and go in. There's parts of. I was asking my hand surgeon. I was like, "How do you do it?" I've just listened to you go in and out and in and out, having the same conversation over and over with patients. And he's like, "I love the trauma. I don't like this part of the job, but I love the trauma, and I love being able to help patients in those
Mm.
traumatic events." And I was like, more power to you, man, because that's whew, wow, what an amazing individual, right? And so I think that concierge medicine sets the example for all of us, all of those people in healthcare. And we have to get away from the idea of, well, this is how we've always done it. That insideritis that I talked about earlier and you've talked about, and that is, well, you know what, Priyanka, Mike, those are really great ideas, but we don't do that here. Or we don't have time for that here. Or my favorite, we'll call you back. Or, like, what's your name again? Do you have an appointment? And you're like, okay, I guess I'm just another number out there. Our final question for Priyanka is one we ask of all of our guests. And you can be however lengthy or short as you'd like to be on this question. And that is, Priyanka, what do you want to be known for?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, 100% I would say I'd love to be known for somebody that was really able to have an impact on, I guess, the quality of experience and the ease of accessing healthcare when you are someone who is a leader or a high performer. I think, as we've discussed in this conversation, there's many difficulties and challenges with being a business leader, or someone in the entertainment sector or whatever it might be, and trying to access healthcare that I had not considered. And of course, we see some of it as well, as as hardworking middle class people, we experience that too. And I think even if I could make a change, even if it is just on one small segment of the population, I would be super, super happy. I think knowing that we can, even if it is just to inspire the change for maybe some of the rest of the population segments as well, I think being known to really change that quality of experience that you receive in the healthcare space would be amazing. I mean, when I was young, you know, when you grow up in a family of doctors, you naturally have a lot to, well, you have a lot of opinions about the healthcare sector because you experience it almost every day. You hear about it every day. And, growing up, I used to think, oh, why would my parents choose this as a career? It sounds so miserable. You're
Yeah.
dealing with people who are sick, who are unhappy. It's not a very nice environment. And going to the doctor's office, you would dread it, right? No one wants to go, well, growing up anyway, no one wanted to go to a doctor's office. And for me, if I could be known as someone whose company was able to change that perspective, or at least inspire a great change, and to make it more accessible, make it more positive for a lot of these clients that we're taking care of, that would be such a win for me. And especially because I've seen that just by doing that, you can also have a real influence on people's outcomes. I mean, that girl that I mentioned that we took to the US for surgery, in the UK, all of the specialists had said no. All of the top hospitals here, they said no, there's nothing more we can really do. We can't change anything for her. Um, and that's how it would have remained if it wasn't for our medical director and our team saying, no, let's actually do things a little bit differently. We don't want to just have this be her experience, that there's nothing more we can do. And I was even in an email trail with some of these leading specialists in the UK where one of them said, oh, we have to be humane and agree that we can't do anything more, which I'm sure many people will understand that's quite a thinly veiled way of saying something else. But that always sticks with me because we just thought, look, we don't want this to be their experience. We don't want them to be told, look, there's nothing we can do for you. And also, we don't think it's humane to do anything for you, because you're basically making the patient feel like we don't want to do anything for you in that position. We know best, and we know that doing anything for you is going to be inhumane. Even though you might want to try everything you want to live your life, we don't really care about that. And luckily, when she came to the US for her surgery, it went very, very well. We were able to help her find a really amazing surgeon. But I think that the biggest takeaway for me was that if we did it like we'd always done it, or like the industry had always done it, she'd still be in the same position here. Quality of life would be really rubbish. She might not have a very long lifespan. And all that changed just because we thought, no, we cannot, give her this experience, and we have to really advocate for our patients. So being known for inspiring that would be really, really amazing. And that would be a win for me. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that makes me a little emotional. It's a wonderful story. And I mean, regardless of, your space or your role today, of wherever you're at and listening to this, um, you know, however you end up feeling about, concierge medicine or whatever it is, I will echo this probably even when I'm long out of healthcare space, is that 5 words from my doctor or from you as the physician to a patient, to your patient on the other side, sitting right now on the other side of the exam room, or on the other side of the text thread or whatever. 5 words from you weigh 1,000 pounds. You're probably one of the top 5 most influential voices in our lives right now. 5 words from you can encourage us and uplift us. Or, hey, Michael, Priyanka, can you come into the office? It's like, oh no, like 5 words from you carry a lot of weight. And so, regardless of how folks feel about concierge medicine, and you and I push this boulder up a mountain every day with the people that we talk to. And it's encouraging to know that you're out there, your physicians are out there, your patients are out there, and getting the assistance and the care and the help and the advocacy that they need. Because I don't know, it might have been Steve Jobs who said it, but make a dent in the universe. And we're not trying to poke a hole in the universe and change the whole thing, but like you said, what you did for that, what your doctors did, was you didn't accept the status quo. You didn't accept this is what everybody else does, and that's just the way we're going to do it. You didn't
Mm.
accept that, and I so appreciate that. And I challenge. Been told I have high expectations for the physicians in my life. Of course, we should all have such high expectations. And, if you can make the world and that patient's world just a little bit better, then we've done our job, right? And it's like, you know what? Concierge medicine isn't for everyone, but it
Mm.
is for the one. And it might not change the world of medicine. It might not change the world of healthcare. It might not even change your world as the physician, in the space, but I guarantee you it's going to change that patient's world. And that's what matters most. It's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It's about being the best doctor for the world, for your patients, and for your local community. Priyanka Chaturvedi, thank you so much for being with us. We'll put the links on how to learn more and connect with HealthClick and let them be a resource for you as well, and how to connect with their care team for the global citizen. I hope that this has been helpful and informative and instructional for all of those listening. Priyanka, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. And please tell your dad and your father I said hello, and your team over there, and that we're behind you, and we appreciate creating remarkable moments with patients that are worth remarking about. So thank you, Priyanka, for your time today.
Thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.